Hi, I'm IKEA, and for today's video I want to do a build showcase on the Ongoing Directive set, and especially set up to do good damage on its own and provide group buffs to its allies, which is my preferred way of setting it up. As always, I'll be making extensive use of my build collection, and in this case one build picture from there, but we'll be discussing two variants today, as I'll basically be setting up a variant that we'll discuss as we take it into gameplay. And as with all my build showcases, it'll be split up into two chapters. In the first chapter, we'll go over the build layout, and then in that same first chapter, we'll go into a few of the calculations and discuss what the build itself does and how it kind of works in a group setup. And in the second chapter, we'll take it into some gameplay, and I will take one of each variant. Although they don't differ that much, they are significantly different enough that they play quite differently, so we will discuss them as we go into that second chapter of gameplay. Before we head into the build, I just want to make a little bit of an advertisement for myself, as I just wanted to make as many people aware as I can that nowadays I'm streaming every evening for the foreseeable time, starting at 9 p.m. Central European Summertime, and going for 3 to 4 or 5, sometimes 6 hours, and just streaming what I'm playing mostly, what I'm farming, sometimes builds that I'm working on for the build collection, and even from time to time, as is the case with these build showcases, I do record them live just because I quite enjoy it with the interaction with the chat and stuff as well. So yeah, if you're interested, if anything of that sounded interesting to you, yeah, come hang out over on my Twitch channel, which is linked down below, the IKEA87. So yeah, I hope to maybe see you there, and let's go on to the build. And here's the main build we'll be discussing today. We'll be also running a variant of it, but I'll introduce that after the calculations, just before the gameplay, as it's a little bit different, but not substantially, so it'll also feature a little bit in the calculations. And yeah, the Ongoing Directive set is very much a damaging set that can also give a group buff. So to introduce it, we have the two-piece bonus here of status effect, which helps a little bit as its main mechanic revolves around bleed. But to me, the bleed is very much a secondary thing that it does. In its three-piece, it just actually has a bonus that a lot of people forget about, which is that it has reload bonus, a reload speed, and that can help a lot because we'll be using especially sadist weapons, as we'll discuss that when we get to the weapons. And its main mechanic is this rules of engagements, and that is whenever you shoot a status affected enemy, they will receive a mark. That mark lasts for 10 seconds. If an enemy dies while marked from any source, so it doesn't need to be you killing them, if they die to anybody else, to anything in the world, to just the status effect you applied to them, in whatever way they die, they will give you, the player running Ongoing Directive, a full magazine of hollow point ammo. And I'm very annoyed always that it says full clip, because yeah, as we all know, clips are a specific thing and magazines are a specific thing. And yeah, with most weapons, we will be getting a full magazine of it. And all allies of yours all group members will receive half a mag of their weapons capacity. So if they are running an AR, they'll be getting 25 rounds. If they have a 50-round magazine, they're running an LMG with 200 rounds, then they'll get 100. And that hollow point ammo, as long as it's part of the shots that are happening, will amplify any weapon damage by 20%. So it doesn't matter if it is you or them. Everybody's basically getting 20% extra damage for the amount of bleed rounds that they have. And with the chest, you can increase this, as if we go to the chest talent, as we'll be using that for one of the builds later on. This goes up to 35% with the chest, but this bonus does not apply to team party members. So you can get this you can use the chest of Ongoing to increase your own amplification, but not to increase it for your group mates. And that's really the reason why I then go with these combination of the sacrifice and the gift, which you can also alter in other pieces, especially for the gift, as that is a DZ item. But starting off with the chest, we're going for the sacrifice, perfect glass cannon. And that's mostly because, yeah, this all damages you deal is amplified by 30% is going to be on top of everything else that we already get. Even without the chests, we're receiving 20% from ongoing. So adding in this 30% is actually very strong. And also one of the minor things that this boosts is also the bleed damage of the build. The bleed damage that it applies with its hollow point rounds is a minor addition to the build, but it does get increased as well by this class. But also with running glass, it actually competes quite well, even against high-end red builds. Of course, not against Striker, because nothing does really, but it does compete quite well, as we'll see in the numbers. For the backpack, I'm going with the gift, and because we are going with the sacrifice, where we have the headshot damage bonus, which isn't that great for us, we can choose to go with the gift to have that crit chance, and to get perfect vigilance. Perfect vigilance is a minor upgrade over normal vigilance, but seeing as we have the option to go for it, we can go for it. The other option to go here, if you don't have it, is to go normal providence, or to even go a Seska backpack with vigilance. And all of those are valid choices. And even if we don't go with the sacrifice, as we'll do with the other layout, we can then go, we will go Seska backpack, because yeah, we don't want just that headshot damage bonus. We want this crit chance. That is the important one. As yeah, the build itself is very much laid around having a decent amount of crit chance and crit damage. All of the pieces here are with crit damage and crit damage mods, and then there's only 2 crit chances on the chest and the backpack, because they will have to have them. And that together on a FAMAS with 3 crit chance mods brings us to a respectable 47 crit chance. And of course, we could amp this up a little bit higher by swapping out a mod or swapping one of the stats out. But actually, if we then go to the build image for this build, I have specifically chosen to go to 47 crit chance as I have it there. And this build, to me, is very much a countdown build. And that means that I will likely be running alongside several coyotes. And especially having a mid-range coyote will already take me to 57. And then those once in a whiles that you get a long-range coyote buff, there's still even a hole for them there. And that's my reasoning for going 47, because the other option, of course, is to swap one crit damage to a crit chance and go to 53, and only leaving a hole basically for the mid-range buff. And both of them actually land basically at the same number. So both of them are valid choices. I choose to leave a bigger hole to have that long-range buff also apply to me if it becomes active. And that is very much down to as well that, I expect always to run this in a group. It is very much a group buffing build. This isn't really a solo build. To me, it is one of the builds that I quite enjoy running, especially in Countdown, as we'll also run it in this specific build in Countdown. As that is its home to me. Buffing 8 people makes it quite strong. Here we can see all of the stats of it. As I said, there's only 2 crit chances on the build, basically, and they are the mandatory ones because they're alongside of a crit damage. Everywhere else, we basically are stacking crit damage. Weapons-wise, we are going with, if I bring the game back up, with Carnage as the secondary weapon, and FAMAS with Sadist as the primary weapon, and the Carnage is of course perfect Sadist, as especially as Sadist makes a lot of sense for this build, as everything we are shooting should be bleeding. If we run out of ammo, we still likely have them bleeding, even if we do run out of a magazine and we don't have them killed yet, so that we get a fresh one. They will likely still be bleeding, and this 20% to bleeding enemies, as it says here, it is plus 20 weapon damage. This is actually one of the ones as well that is one of the original ones that is wrong. This is 20% amp. This is a 20%. It doesn't add to the pool of weapon damage. It is its own separate multiplier, making it quite strong. So together with glass, together with only having one source of total weapon damage in perfect vigilance, all of these are basically at their full strength. Glass, of course, cannot be additive to anything else. Vigilance could be, but in our case isn't, unless there's a FI running alongside of us. And then we have Sadist as well as another amp. And I very much enjoy having a FAMAS on this, as especially the reload speed brings the FAMAS down to 1.7 seconds. As with an M4 or a carbine, they still have a decently longer reload time. And we're not running it as fast as, because we're choosing to go sadist. It is very valuable to go sadist here. And both of these weapons will actually have their own purpose here, because especially the Carnage actually is not as much damage as it could be. It does compete mostly just because it can go this 9.5 crit chance, but only when you're fighting armor, because yeah, the second that 21% health damage comes into play from ARs, if you're fighting something that has health, yeah, there is no competing with a FAMAS at that point. What it does have, though, is that it can have a larger capacity of 150 rounds, and that's basically my safety backup. If I do run out of AR rounds, and for some reason the triggers don't happen, the bleed times out, something stays up for way too long, then I still have a large amount in here. And also, with LMGs, you can unload them once per room and not reload them, and I'll show that basically in the gameplay. And of course, I'm pairing it here with whatever pistol takes your fancy. In my case, I am taking a TDI card custom for that skill tier. I'll use it from time to time to get an extra charge on my hive, so I can rest somebody else while keeping my hive. Talent-wise, finisher makes sense, but it's not... you can basically run whatever you like, especially, for instance, the Busy Lethal B, of course, is an option. If we move on to skills, a Reviver Hive is, of course, very recommended for especially all glass builds. And in this case, I'm taking one as well. For the other one, what you really want to have is a skill to start off the chain. So in tradition with his name, this Ongoing Directive, you have to get it started first, and then it's ongoing. So once you start getting bleed bullets, you can... especially in Countdown, for instance, you will likely keep going with bleed bullets. You will likely not run into a scenario with the FAMAS that you will not have bleed bullets and that you don't have a source anymore to apply a continuous marking system to keep getting fresh bullets. In my case, I very much like the Banshee Pulse, and that's also why I got Gunner with this. As Gunner, of course, also provides its own bonuses that we'll discuss once we, after this, go into specialization. But the Banshee Pulse is easy to use, applies a decently long debuff, although you basically only have to hit the enemy once while they're debuffed. So it could even be a short duration bleed or something from just the canister exploding next to them to get it going. But especially in Countdown, to have something to start the chain off is handy, and I find Banshee Pulse quite useful for that. Also, as a glass, this can quite often save you. Now, of course, we could go everything else of Blinder Firefly. You could even go Foam Cam. You could go even the Fire Cam, the Fire Sticky, the EMP Sticky, Shock Traps, the Hive as well, of course. There are many choices that you can make there. And sometimes it makes sense to take something else. But in my case, especially, I'm pairing it with Gunner. And if we then move on to specializations as well, it pairs well with basically all of them, because especially Gunner can provide that third fast reload, which I'll use with the Carnage to get a really fast reload out of it. It has a foam grenade, it can provide that Banshee Pulse, it has that on-kill rate of fire increase, it has a little bit of bonus armor, and all of those, armor on kill, and all of those together make Gunner quite the choice for it. Survivalist as well, because you'll be providing debuffs basically on all enemies, and we'll run Survivalist with the first build that we run, which is more dedicated to buffing and less to its own damage. And in that one, Survivalist makes a lot of sense. You get the flame grenades, you get you provide a group buff to status affected enemies, and you'll, just like an Eclipse, you'll be status affecting most enemies. Firewall as well kind of makes sense. We could go get that Striker Shield, as you can somewhat use this sometimes as close distance. It pairs decently well, but in the same way that with most AR builds, it isn't the best choice, because usually you do want to stay a little bit further. Demolitionist, of course, can be useful. It has a bleed grenade to start things off. The grenade launcher itself is pretty good. and that group buff of 5 damage targets out of cover to your subgroup is quite strong as well. The TAC 50 isn't the best choice, but especially the flashbang grenades that can provide you are quite useful, as they have a very large range, and you can then maybe have your skill be something like a shield that you can hide behind, and then provide your initial, your start of the ongoing bleed bullets with that flashbang, because yeah, it is very easy to use. Technician can provide you an extra skill tier for your skill that you're using, and of course have EMP grenades. So yeah, all 6 actually have things that we really like. So yeah, you have to basically make your pick. For the damage one, I really like the minigun and gunner, so I'll be picking that. But yeah, let's move on to some calculations. And here we have the calculation sheet that I've prepared for today. And to give a short introduction, there's also a video on my channel about how to fill these in and how these are set up, which can give you all the information. But just to give a short intro, these are used to compare up to 10 builds. The output happens up here, and the input happens down here. And all of these builds, unless specifically stated, are comparing to the build in the top row. And this top build is a glass vigilance red, and followed up by unbreakable or obliterate vigilance red, and then unbreakable vigilance red. As those are 3 builds that I feel I and most people will know decently well, especially if they've been around for a while. Everybody has ran a high-end glass red at some point, I would feel. And if we then compare the builds that we have here, that I've prepared for today, just to briefly state it, is that the first 2 up here are the glass variant, as I've showed it on the build picture, where one is with the Carnage, one is with the FAMAS. And that's just to show the number difference that a FAMAS and a Carnage will have. Even though Carnage actually has 5% more on its talent, it does not actually catch up to a FAMAS, which is something that I actually thought was the other way around. Although actually on sustain, of course, even though that Carnage is reloading in 4.1 seconds, even with that reload bonus, it still beats out the FAMAS a little bit on sustain. And that's actually why I feel that maybe I, in the past, thought that the Carnage would be a good choice. Although even I still hold that, but not for damage output. So that's why I'm pairing a FAMAS with a Carnage. Both of them are provide their own specific utility, which I'll talk about in the gameplay and show in the gameplay. As yeah, one has a much higher magazine size, of course, and that means that we can have a lot more bullets in there that are amplified. And that will come into play quite often, I find. Now, if we compare damage-wise, especially the FAMAS version to just a glass red, we can see that it's getting up there. It is getting pretty close to a glass red, where, for instance, a red FI is pretty far off. It is around the 80% mark. And this ongoing directive, of course, it is glass as well, just like the glass vigilance red, high-end red. But it is getting pretty close. It is 5% off, less than 5% off on the burst, and it actually outsustains it because of that reload speed that the build provides. Now, of course, this is including the buff at all times, and especially with the FAMAS, there are points where you might reload or run out of bullets, the special ammo, and be shooting without the buff up. And then getting a kill and you'll get a fresh magazine's worth. But the times that it isn't accounted for here. So this is accounting for perfect uptime, and it won't have perfect uptime. So you have to keep that in mind a little bit. Now, the second one that this second set down here is the same with the Carnage and the FAMAS, but then with running the chest of Ongoing Directive instead of the glass, and then running a Coyote alongside of it, which will be the first build that we'll be taking into gameplay. I'll show the layout of it at the start of that gameplay, but here are the numbers of it already, and especially getting rid of the perfect glass that we have and going with the Ongoing Directive talent. Of course, we're Also, that lets us be a lot more aggressive because we are not glass. We're not taking one shot to go to our health gate, but we are giving up a lot of damage to do that. As we can see here on the right side, is just a comparison of the 4 ongoing directive ones. And yeah, we start off with the Carnage one being as the base for it is at 100%. The FAMAS goes over it by 8%, which is quite strong. And then the FAMAS version of the with the chess variant is almost 7% behind. And that is quite a noticeable difference. That's basically the same from going from glass to obliterate, which is kind of calculation-wise kind of the same as well. If we then compare it to the striker, we're comparing the best variant, so that FAMAS variant, to strikers, and we can see that, yeah, strikers has a 36% more burst, and even though sustain-wise, of course, these builds do decently well because they have that reload speed bonus, strikers has a weapon handling bonus, so it catches up decently well, although not to the same degree, of course. But yeah, it's still 25% higher than this build on its sustain. And one thing I want to discuss here as well is one thing that we don't talk about that often outside of some circles is especially what damage per mag matters in weapons. And damage per mag also kind of translates into burst length. And here I've calculated both the burst length of the FAMAS and the Carnage, as the Negev, as I try to remember its base weapon name, even though it is there. The FAMAS is firing for 3.3 seconds, and the Negev is firing for 10.6 seconds. And that means that just having that longer burst time means that you can basically blanket an area for longer with bleed rounds. And of course, also have just a higher magazine. So for instance, when you're firing at a name, the FAMAS will likely run out of bullets before the name dies if you're soloing it in Countdown with 8 people or 7 others nearby. The Carnage can kill that enemy, most likely, especially on the glass variant, in its 150 rounds, meaning that all of the rounds that it fires are with that amplified damage from the special bleed rounds. As then if we move on to what we also kind of had with the FI, where I put together this part, where in this first section we are looking at having 8 glass vigilance red versus having 7 glass vigilance red with one of the glass variants that we're discussing here, the FAMAS one specifically. And I'm giving all of them the Coyote buff for 15 to 25 meters, because it is expected that at least one of those is up at all times. So those are active on all of these builds, just to also bring up the numbers, because we had that crit chance hole that we are leaving up for Coyote, of course. And then we can see that here we can see that the increase from going just 8 glass vigilance reds to going 7 glass vigilance reds together with this ongoing directive build means that with the damage it provides itself as well, we're doing more even with 7, as long as the bullets are up on most people. And that's the downside of this build versus FI, kind of, is that this has likely less uptime, but not always. It is very dependent on the player, where FI is a lot more dependent on a little bit of your allies, and if they if they hide behind shields and or maybe are running things that give them bonus armor, so that they don't get chip damaged out of getting the FI buff. Here, it is very much dependent on the player running Ongoing Directive to try to keep the bullets up as much as possible. So yeah, it is very much dependent on how you kind of justify it and how much uptime you expect to have. Because in some cases, you can have really high uptime if you know all of the spawns in missions and such. But especially where I'm using this in Countdown, you can't predict as well where everything's going to spawn. So you'll sometimes miss a wave and the buff won't be active on anyone, basically. And sometimes you'll catch most of the waves, especially on the smaller zones. So it's very dependent. You can't really make a definitive statement here. But especially the build itself is not a weak build. It is keeping up its end of the bargain, basically. And that makes up for it anyway. That even if you're not doing it that well, you're still likely ahead of having 8 glass reds versus having seven of them together with one of the ongoings. And here in 4-man, we can see that actually it drops to, even with the buff, if the buff had 100% uptime, 7 glass vigilance reds did more just on their own without the ongoing directive in there, more than 8. With 3, it isn't. And that's always the case. You're applying a buff to other people, and the amount of people that are getting it really matters. Same is true for FI, same is true for Red Patriot. As here we can see that the group, or the 3 of them, but together with the ongoing directive, applying themselves strongly, if they can, and if they're running the glass version, especially to keep their own damage up, we can see that group-wise, we still go up by quite a degree. And that's because this, especially the ongoing directive, can, because it is set up as to be a glass, it can actually compete with just being another red build. Now, of course, this balance completely changes if it's strikers. And I haven't made one with strikers, but of course, they would outcompete us, but also we're applying a buff to even stronger builds. So balance-wise, it actually kind of stays the same. But of course, what the ongoing player provides the team diminishes a little bit. And lastly, I just want to discuss here, as I've prepared one little last part here, and that's the bleed. And everybody kind of, well, I as well, the bleed is not the most important part of the build. And some people say that it doesn't matter at all. I don't agree with that, because if we actually look at it, so this is the bleed of the glass one, because the glass is also applying to the bleed as well. We're not using the backpack because we don't want to give up a backpack talent, even though, of course, the backpack from Ongoing Directive has its own talent of increasing bleed by 50% duration and 100% damage. It's not worth it versus a vigilance, I feel quite strongly. So what we can see here is, here are the numbers if 1 or more per people are bleeding, as that tick of the bleed happens twice a second, which is the case with all status effects. So with just 1 bleed, we're getting another 89k damage per second, because this is just applying per second then. And if we add that basically into the FAMAS version, the glass version that we were discussing earlier, we can see that even with 1 enemy bleeding, we already have 1.3% more damage. And then if we go down, for instance, to 4 bleeding, we can see it's 5.29%. So it does add, that bleed does add up. And especially trying to have multiple bleeds going at all times can be quite a strong thing to have. So yeah, having discussed all of these numbers, and of course everything of this will be linked down below, together with the build pictures and this calculation sheet, if you want to consult it yourself. Let's move on to the first build, and let's take it into some gameplay. And here's the first variant that we'll run, and as I said in the calculations, this is with the Ongoing Directive chest, and we're giving up glass to basically have a little bit less personal damage, because that's how it does end up without glass. But we also don't have to deal with being glass and being very fragile. So it is a valuable way of running it, and an option. I don't have this build specifically on my build collection, but I do have the chest in my stash, so I can just go and grab it and swap it over to this. In here as well, with the chest, we increase our hollow point ammo amplification to 35% from the base 20%, but this only applies to us. Only we get 35% damage once we have the bleed rounds. So it does make up, basically, it makes up 15% of that of the glass, basically. Although, of course, glass is a separate multiplier, so it's multiplying against that initial 20. So it's not 15, but even more than that. It's not 30%, but it's more than that, basically, in the calculation-wise. But yeah, it is basically falling behind. We could, of course, also go obliterate and such. But actually, I find if you go without glass, you're better off going with a coyote, as we have it here. Going the chest gives you the option of going with coyote. Now, of course, we can't go the gift anymore because then we would only have the first brand bonus of Providence, which was the headshot damage, which isn't great. But we'll just go a normal Seska Vigilance backpack. And yeah, we go up to 4 seconds on that Vigilance, but that's such a minor thing anyway. It is a bonus, but it isn't the biggest one. Here I'm taking the St. Elmo as well, as I just want to briefly discuss it in gameplay, but also likely halfway through we'll swap it to be a Scorpio, as that is usually what I do run on this build. As the Elmo does have a quirk, and I just basically want to discuss it here as it fits and it doesn't fit with this build. I've swapped to Survivalist here as well, just to provide that group buff to allies, have a flame grenade. Both of those things are quite valuable and quite strong. And especially going this chest variant where we're giving up some personal damage, it's okay to even give up a little bit more personal damage, as Group Gunner, of course, has that on-kill fire rate. That is quite strong, and that reload, every 3 reloads being pretty close to instant, is actually also pretty strong. But we're giving those up to provide a group buff, basically. Another one. And because we also are no longer Gunner, we have to choose a different skill than Banshee because it's no longer available, and I've chosen Foam here. As we'll take this into challenging countdown, as I'll run that with this, just to have some time to also easily discuss the build as we're running it, and then we'll take the glass variant into some heroic countdown. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the loading screen. And here we are headed into a challenging countdown, just to make it a little bit easier, less stressful for me too while I'm explaining it. As yeah, later on we'll take the glass one into a heroic one where it somewhat more belongs. And here I will try to especially give the group buff to as many players as I can, and that means that I want to basically shoot as many things while I have my bleed rounds up, and even if I don't have my bleed rounds up, just get it going with the foam that I have available to me. As we'll be fighting Rikers here, as Kelso says there. And yeah, the Ongoing Directive set is really a decent group buff build, but it is more reliant on the player that is playing it than, for instance, Red FI is. True Patriot, Red Patriot also has that a little bit. As yeah, we'll go right after the first directive, the nearest one, and deal with the hunters as we always do with Countdown. We go kill all the hunters, get all the directives down, and then go do our own thing. As he hasn't jammed yet, there's no anti-status effect directive, so I will be getting my bleed rounds there because he was marked, because I had foamed him. And there I have my bleed rounds and my FAMAS. In a second as well, I'll swap over to the Elmo. Actually, I'll do that here. And I'll run the Elmo a little bit, but the Elmo actually, so the Elmo seems to make a lot of sense because it's applying a status effect and we can use that to get going. Although, of course, it doesn't do it from the first mag or the second. You basically need to fire 1.5 mag for us to be able to get it. As I'll hit this button just to get this directive down. And one of the annoying things of the Elmo, because of course this is one of the builds that would benefit from that extra crit chance that it can provide. One of the annoying things is that the shock rounds will overwrite bleed rounds. Also for your allies, so if they're running Elmos, once they trigger their shock rounds, they will also overwrite the bleed rounds, but then once they get a kill, the bleed rounds will overwrite the shock rounds. So it kind of works together, but not truly. As we'll go for the final directive here as well. So just try to get a mark on him as something is getting hacked, which is that. I'll go out of my way to shoot that thing. More because if it was a striker drone, that could be very dangerous to us. As our ally is getting the one over there, as we can basically go turbine and then containment and then back to reactor. So yeah, we should go, or actually even containment first, if, yeah, as that player is going. Because yeah, then we'll go basically in a straight line back.
Shade tech detected.
As all three objectives are well doable. There's no VIP basically. And yeah, trying to stick with Elmo here as I swapped and actually did lose the shock rounds or the build up towards shock rounds. But I just want to briefly show it here. Having that happen is actually quite annoying. One of the things as well is you can't override. So in the same way as with all status effects, for instance, with the fire of an eclipse, you can only overwrite stronger bleeds a stronger status effect will override a weaker status effect. And here, for instance, at one point there, I was shooting at somebody that was already bleeding from some other source. I don't know what exactly. And I couldn't overwrite it because my bleed was likely less strong than theirs. And yeah, especially here without the glass, the bleed is just 37k. But that's still a decent. It isn't nothing. It is a little bit more, and especially if I can get it on a wave that is spawning. So, for instance, I'll try to do that. Well, actually, this isn't the wave. This is just the boss. But I'll put it on the boss. But here, for instance, when I'm reloaded there, I have now shock rounds in the weapon and not my bleed rounds, and that of course cuts into my 35% amplified damage that my bleed rounds do. So the Elmo, while it kind of looks like it would make sense, it just doesn't because it cuts into your bleed rounds, and your bleed rounds are your damage. So I am actually going to swap this to be a Scorpio, and that is actually the thing that I would recommend you run. As the Scorpio, of course, can provide its own status effects. You can tap a few times with the Scorpio and then swap over to the FAMAS and then kill them with that while marking them, getting this bleed rounds into the FAMAS, and then from there just using the FAMAS. And especially the 8 rounds of the Scorpio, even though you can, of course, then get it onto the Scorpio as well to get bleed rounds on it as well. And I will actually do that here just as a backup. As it's always handy to have both of your weapons at least filled a little bit with the bleed round, so you have a backup if you do run out. Although since the rework of Ongoing Directive to how it works now, where once you, in the past it used to be the enemy had to die with your status effect on them. Nowadays it's the mark, and that mark stays for 10 seconds, which is longer than as I get blinded by that heavy. As I try to get into cover and blow up his backpack tanks, although here I'll just hide. He's aiming at me, I'll just hide. Let my allies deal with him while he's aimed at me. And sometimes it is worthwhile to play like that, just make sure that you survive. Because if I peeked there, he would have just put me down quite easily, because he has a lot of damage. As we should actually go and do the objective, which is I'll grab this chest as well along the way. As these chests, this black chest, as always, provide us with some SHT calibrations, and I do use a lot of those. As the team is getting that thing over there. As here, for instance, I'll try to get my bleed onto several enemies. Each of them dying will cause all my allies to get the bleed rounds as well. And that's the more important thing, because the player running Ongoing will keep their bleed rounds going decently well. But of course, all of my allies will only get half a mag, and half a mag bonus isn't super strong. It doesn't stay around for long enough for it to be consistent. Not in the same way that FI can be. And that's the reason why FI really does get my top spot. But if there's already an FI, and that's also the reason that this character has both the Ongoing Directive build and the FI. And here actually, so with this name, I'm fighting them solo, although now my allies are coming, but I ran out of bleed rounds before I killed them. So my second mag there, after the reload, didn't have any of the bleed rounds in it, so it didn't have the amplified damage. And that's the reason why in the second one, I will be using the Carnage at points as well. Because with the Carnage, I have 150 rounds, and even if the burst of the Carnage is less than the FAMAS, once the FAMAS runs out of those 50 rounds, it is doing less than the Carnage, where the Carnage, because it can keep that up for 150 rounds, sometimes it makes sense. And that's why I will be running the. I often do run the Carnage with this with Ongoing Directive.
I need you to get it back online.
So yeah, we're heading into the main objective here. As I'm also looking through my allies, their builds or their skills a little bit, and their armor bars. They look to be going for the objective. I'll go set up with where the second objective in a second will be, and take long-range shots at allies or enemies for my allies. Even though I'm not really in range of some of these fights. Oh well, him in this case. But once that bar is full, a button right behind me. So actually here I'm out of bleed rounds and actually not getting more. So I'll use that Scorpio to get it going. As for instance here, a wave seems to have spawned here, and me getting bleed on multiple enemies, as I showed as well, with the bleed numbers. Although this is in the glass version, so the bleed is a lot weaker. But if I can get bleed on several enemies, it does add up. It does add up to be a decent chunk of especially if you get it up to, like, if you catch a wave while they're spawning. As I'll move across, they've shot the generator that opened up there. I'm going for the other button, hitting that, and I'll actually hit this generator as well. One of the things is, for instance, with these generators, they don't bleed. And same with dogs, of course, they don't bleed. So you are weaker against them. And that's one of the downsides from time to time with, as I tried to get 3 shots of the Scorpio on that named, but I didn't. And yeah, you shouldn't go one-to-one with these kinds of enemies unless you have something. And I could have actually foamed them in place and then killed them as I'm doing here. I don't have any special ammo, but once I kill him, I'm hoping my allies help as well. It would be nice. Once I kill him, I will have ammo again, because that mark, as you saw there, stays up quite a while. I'm gonna go grab the loot from this chest, as yeah, we're about to hit the end of the timer there, which makes the last wave spawn, and then we kill them, and then we get to go out of here. So it was a decently smooth run. And I've also gone out of my way to not have the close range buff active with countdowns, as yeah, the runs before this that I've tried did have them, and that of course very much skews the number. So if you ever see people having a very high, like inconceivably high damage numbers with some of their builds, check if the close range buff is underneath the minimap, and if it is, that will very much skew the damage numbers to an insane amount. So yeah, I'm of course avoiding that. As yeah, we're going to now go get the main chest, and then we're going to head towards extraction. Briefly, actually going to check how far extraction is. It is the eastern one. So we do have a small walk, but not the longest one. And that's always the case with reactor. It's centrally located, so it is pretty close to multiple extractions. I don't have a hive, but likely by the time we reach the hunters, I will have one again. As yeah, that ally is pushing in really fast. I hope for them they don't die. It is not smart to rush into the hunters here. It's much better to wait for your team, move in as a blob, as especially the hunters once they're engaged, and if you don't kill them in that initial engagement, basically, they fall back, usually. So here, this hunter hasn't yet. I'll mark multiple stuff, or attempt to, so just so that when they die, they'll provide me the buff. As here I'll heal as well, and having the survivalist med pack, I will actually also heal all my allies. I'll grab all this loot and I'll start pushing in. As I also have foam as well. I'll foam in place and move up. As once we're a blob like this, stuff should melt around us, at least should. I'm gonna toss a flame grenade. I am survivalist, so I'm gonna make use of that. That flame grenade is gonna catch everything coming down here, CC them a little bit, and also, of course, that flame counts as a status effect for me to get more bullets out, of course, as well. So as I see something behind me, which is likely to be the hunter, which I guessed correctly. I have foam available to me, although, yeah, I want to wait till he gets into a position, because, yeah, it is very finicky to get a shot up there. As I get sniped, and I do have eye, so I'll make use of it. And yeah, that was the hunters sniping me out. As yeah, hunters hit hard, especially sniper ones, even to PFEs. But we've cleared out the chopper. We should be able to clear out this fellow. I'll get a fresh grenade underneath these people. At the very least, I'll get them to move and not fire for a few seconds. As yeah, they're escaping a little bit, but I can help clean this out. As I'm hoping something with my mark dies, or at least, for instance, there somebody shocked them, so I could apply a new mark, because I had run out of shock or my bleed bullets, and I didn't really have a mark at the ready. There's a fresh chopper coming in, as I'll grab on that. I'll toss my flame grenade underneath them as well. We have this one enemy breaking off, but they got intercepted in the end. That was a decently fast clear and pretty clean. Although, of course, this is just challenging countdown. But yeah, in a second we'll go and do a heroic one, which really requires a lot more damage. And especially the buffing builds can help to offset a little bit more or less effective builds to give them a little bit more of a push so that they can kill for themselves. I'll move around, try to catch up on this other side, foam them in place. As the other allies are helping us as well. Yeah. And here I'll just grab everything or deconstruct it. I'll grab this med bag as well, not that I'll need it. We likely could get this chopper. I mean, not even likely, we can get this chopper. I'm gonna toss my flame grenade on top of it, which is a simple tactic that is quite handy, because yeah, everything then that is coming out is on fire. And of course, my group buff of status effect to my subgroup is quite strong, of 10% to status affected enemies. So yeah, they die a lot easier. I'm full up, but I'll check there that there wasn't a chevron in there, but it's all just deconstruct it, and we'll head to extraction. And yeah, this very much is a somewhat weaker version with the ongoing directive chest, but it doesn't have to deal with that glass mechanic, letting me be a lot easier. But both of them are viable, both of them are very effective, and in a second we'll take the glass version into a heroic. As yeah, here we are in a heroic countdown as we're heading in towards the first hunters, as we skipped over the initial part a little bit. But yeah, we're going to run up to this hunter. Somebody else tried to Banshee Pulse him, but I saw actually that the status effect debuff or the status effect directive, the immunity one, was active. So I won't be able to get my bleed rounds until we get to the other side of this, as that is where that directive is. So for a little bit, I am actually quite less useful, as I also, because I can't status affect the enemies because of that directive, I can't also provide my allies with any of that ammo or myself. So I am very much weakened. I basically 20% less than I had on the damage numbers there. And this is of course the build with the sacrifice, with the gift backpack, together with a sadist AR, and I'll do it here, but yeah, again, he's immune. That was just getting the frustration out. Although it did pulse him, of course. It does do that. Pulse is not a status effect, so it does still apply that. We are killing them plenty fast enough, which is nice. As yeah, especially on heroic, damage matters a lot more. Your team matters a lot more. Usually what I do for heroic countdown is I prefer to at least have like started off by having a 3-man or 4-man group that I'm part of, where we are basically know that we at least have a few competent players going in, because you do need that with heroic countdown. As I'll set myself up to headshot him a little bit as Yashi jumps over into the open, and seeing as what I would do if I wasn't that status effect as that directive over there in a second will go away. We should go containment all, and hopefully that ally doubles back. except they don't, but it's also fine. Missing one person is not the issue. As we'll head into, although I believe I should get instantly died as well, so that, that is an issue for them. As we'll push into here, and yeah, so one thing I wanted to talk about is especially one subject that also kind of came up, of course, in the fog of war video, and that's burst length. And I'm going to discuss it here in why it sometimes does matter, and that's actually the reason why I have this carnage on my back, and I will use it from time to time, as especially if there is, so for instance there as well, that outcast being on fire from themselves will allow me to already get the special ammo on top of them, or the mark on top of them, and then get special ammo for it. But here, for instance, the carnage, what it can provide me is, especially if I'm fighting unnamed or fighting the hunters towards the end, the FAMAS will run out of the hollow point rounds after 50 rounds. That is its magazine size. So if I don't get a fresh kill to get more bullets into it, I won't have more bullets than that. And then the carnage kind of makes sense when, for instance, shooting later on that first hunter, or even if I didn't have the status directive there blocking me from using it on the initial hunters, then for those hunters it makes a lot of sense to have that carnage, because the carnage will keep that up for 150 rounds. We'll have you'll have the bleed rounds for 150 rounds. And then it does win, because yeah, the FAMAS runs out of the special rounds after 50 rounds, and then it starts just firing if they are also done bleeding, as I will go down from that, because I am glass. But yeah, one down from a hug, I'm fine with that. My hive will be back by extraction, which is mostly the place where I mostly care about it. One thing I do want to do is not die here. I'm in weakened state, as I did go down. So I don't want to die again, basically. I'll use my Banshee to provide myself with a few seconds of breathing room, and hit the side of that box for half of that because geometry.
Area secure.
And yeah, so the carnage does make sense here, and that's why I'm also using it here. So for some of those fights, I will pull out the carnage, especially if there's, for instance, a named suddenly in front of me and I don't have any other targets to hit. Then yeah, I'll pull out the carnage, hit them, and have 150 rounds instead of the 50 rounds to kill them. Because especially on heroic countdown with 8-man scaling, basically you will not easily kill them with just the FAMAS. I'm briefly checking where we're headed, as we are going to reactor. And I'm hoping that, as we did lose one player, so we are down one, and I'm pretty far behind, but I'll catch up. I did go grab my loot, of course, because I do want that, especially as well. And as we're heading to the next directive, in heroic as well, time is somewhat of an issue, and that does make VIP a little bit less useful to do. And especially it's dangerous for teams to basically get strung out, and especially during the extraction, if most of the team goes in one by one, they will completely get destroyed. As I'm just briefly checking that, because I don't see my allies on there, the markers start coming up. I didn't see my allies there, and for a second I was confused that maybe they had gone to cooling tower. But they haven't. They have gone to the correct place. I'm just running a lot behind, but I'll catch up. And here's the downside, for instance, in comparison with Red FI. Red FI would still be providing its buff, even if I'm late here, basically, it would still be providing its buff to all its allies. Here, because I'm not marking anything here, I'm not actively doing the thing that I need to do, as I'll put some over there as well, just so he will die very quickly and provide my allies for a little bit. As yeah, for instance, here, my FAMAS is now out of the special rounds. By the time that we kill him, I've wasted a little bit of damage, while I didn't have my hollow point rounds providing me extra output. I'll check up here for the chest. It is not this one. I don't see it open over there. I'll check down here. This one's open, so it's by the stairs over there. As yeah, in all of these zones, there are 3 chest positions. 2 of them will look open. 1 of them will have been closed. This one is now opened, of course, because the loot's on the ground. And that has been one of my allies. I run to get back up again as while I'm talking, I am also distracting myself and not playing the best, but I hope that, at least I'm giving all of the information required to understand this build decently well. Because especially this group is pretty strong, and we don't have the close range buff as well, of course, that can make it super easy, and I especially avoided that, of course. And even without that, of course, here the team's doing really well. So this will be likely an easy extraction, except if we get strung out, as sometimes happens, and we feed ourselves one by one to the hunters, then that can still go quite wrong. And especially on heroic, that is a dangerous option. I'll push in. I see that heavy there. This is the main, so already some people are actually on the point. I'm going to go help them a little bit if I can. As I'll loot as well, of course. Well, deconstruct. I see that stuff over there. I'm going to also destroy that thing. And as long as I'm providing several marks and several stuff is dying, there is decent uptime to the bleed rounds. But it's not to the extent that you would usually hope. Just in effect, while it has some decent uptime, it is not to the level of, for instance, FI. Although, of course, FI then has the chip damage issue where as long as chip damage is happening to players, they will be losing it if they don't have bonus armor. Although here, for instance, we have somebody providing what seems to have been Vanguard. I didn't catch it, but I didn't actually start it. I didn't hold for long enough, as I got distracted by something being around us, as I thought it might have been behind us. And I'll hold the zone, even though this ally is doing it as well. I'll move out. I'll go kill. I'll go mark some stuff, especially so my allies have some rounds. And here's what I mean with what I meant with it is with the FI, it's much more reliant on. Because, for instance, here I actually don't have the bleed rounds. Nothing has died yet with my debuffs on them. So I should actually pull out the Carnage here, but I'll just finish him off with the FAMAS, just so I have fresh rounds on the FAMAS as well. As you will want to have to put on multiple weapons to have the debuff up already. Looking over there as well, they're hitting that one. I'll go loot my chest over here.
The facility. 5 minutes to lockdown.
Making sure that I get that, and I'll start actually moving. Everybody's getting objectives, which is perfect. I'll go, for instance, here actually, so this named, I'm not going to kill him in one FAMAS mag because I'm basically soloing him here. A few allies are adding in now. But yeah, it made a lot more sense for me there to use the Carnage on him. As actually, as a Galvanize that is triggering on us, providing us with bonus. As I'll move away from there, as I've already lost my health gauge, so I will go down once I basically hit that point. It will take quite a while for it to refresh. I'm out of those rounds again, and that's kind of the issue a little bit on. I could actually use my Banshee there to gain some again, and likely will. Although she was found, so I could have just gotten them normally. And yeah, we got through the main objective. Gonna make sure that I do grab all of the loot. And yeah, I am checking loot on the ground. I don't have the amount of inventory space to pick up everything. So but I'm decently fast at checking loot. So I do it quickly and then get out. And then I have basically enough to just grab the hunter loot quickly. So in that fight, I don't have to. And we can jump down here as well, which is one of the shortcuts that you can take from here, which not everybody is aware of, which doesn't help that much, but yeah, it's cool points. We are getting a little bit strung out, exactly as I feared, for instance. And I hope they basically wait when they get to the hunter. I'm going to grab my Carnage already because, yeah, I won't have enough rounds, especially for that first hunter to kill them with. Although I only have... actually, well, yeah, no, I can reload this and have the And one of the things as well, there's only, for the special ammo, there's only a 2-digit. So here, likely, I have 149 rounds, but it is only showing 49 rounds. Which is just a minor thing that you have to be aware of.
They armed hostiles detected.
As yeah, I'll output as much as I can. And we'll move towards extraction. I can reload here even in between. I'm going to we got disrupted. I'm going to toss a grenade over there, catch something maybe, as I am expecting indeed this guy to be a hunter. Disruption is about to end. I'll heal up and I will Banshee as soon as that disrupt wears off. And yeah, for instance, here I'm using more than the FAMAS could have provided. And in that kind of cases, burst length, the firing length does make sense as a factor. Yeah, I do have a hide. We were off of the disruption. I should have gone for cover, but I was hoping he wasn't going to shoot me, although that was that was wishful thinking on my part, as yeah, I was damaging him quite heavily. I'm going to put my mark on multiple things, just so whenever anything dies, just we're providing. Here, I'll swap over to my FAMAS because yeah, my FAMAS does have a ton more damage, and I have multiple things marked, so it's likely that I will have some continuous rounds. As especially we have a new, fresh group coming from the chopper. And I'm going to go over here and try to catch some of them, as I'm trying to see where most of them are, but actually that was mostly drones over there. Because oh yeah, go through, loot all this, grab some resources. Still have one hunter up, I believe. So yeah, we should go kill him. So it's not a nice thing to leave a hunter alive. Their only purpose is to provide us with dog tags, so let's go get that. But actually he was dead already. As yeah, here I'll push in, use my bench balls through this wall as I can. Mark multiple things. For instance, here with this extraction, although of course the extraction is the least important part, but with that extraction, I will have pretty high uptime on the bleed rounds as I'll spread around the love and mark multiple targets, and most of them will die. So I'll mark everything coming down. So yeah, there will be continuous uptime on all this. As one has got past, so some rush to us, but I was like, my allies will get it. As yeah, we got a decently easy heroic run, which is not always a given, as I actually see that there's a loot back there, of course, which I could go get and briefly check that. It's not something useful, as I am full up, actually. As we're dealing with the last chopper, we'll likely get, and then we'll extract out. And yeah, so this is basically what the playstyle of it is. It is a little bit more reliant on the player to get a bit more out of the build, where the FI is more actually reliant on the players getting buffed over the players doing the buffing. But in the same way as with Red Patriot, we don't have enough time for that next chopper because it'll come in right now. But yeah, let us extract, and we'll see that we have gotten
if it wasn't for you,
208 coins, which means that we got all of the dog tags. And yeah, we shall move on over into the conclusion. And to conclude this video, I hope that I somewhat showed what this build can do as one of the three good buffing builds. As together, I feel this shares a spot with the Red Patriot as the second place to Red FI for group buffing. But of course, if there is a Red FI already, then this makes perfect sense. And of the three, it has the highest personal damage because, of course, with its setup where it can have a chest and a backpack talent that isn't from the set and still have a damage talent from the set itself as well in those hollow point ammo, makes it decently strong on its personal end, which is the strength of Ongoing Directive versus the other ones. But the uptime on its bullets for allies is quite low, I find, and is quite dependent on the player playing them. So it has its upside, it has its downside. It is at the very least an interesting build that, yeah, very much I feel has a place if you are going into buffing builds. And that will also actually be the subject of my next video, which will be about the 3 buffing builds, the Red Patriot, the Red FI, and this ongoing directive, Red Ongoing, where I will go a little bit in depth into how it works even when several of them are together, how that ends up on calculation ends when you have a mix of the buffing builds together, and what even happens if you have all 3 of them together with some good damage dealing builds. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video and at least found it somewhat informative. As I hope you join me on Twitch or in my upcoming videos, and have a good night.